Hello friends, I'm Aaron, and let's talk about StormGate and its current alpha. Before we begin, I have a few quick things to cover, not sponsors. Firstly, StormGate is a game being developed by Frost Giant Studios, ex-developers from Blizzard. And due to this, I will be referring to Warcraft and StarCraft 2 and Brood War, especially, in this video as a point of comparison for the previous work. Secondly, I am not an alpha tester, nor have I received any communication from Frost Giants at all about Stormgate outside of the confirmation email that, you signed up for the beta list. You'll get there eventually. Or, sorry, alpha. Thirdly, I have seen the alpha footage and content that was leaked. It was leaked in a YouTube video, and I've got bits of information here and there from people who have played it. I will not reveal the players for obvious reasons, but I will say that this right here was the video. It's on screen somewhere, I'm sure. This is the leak that I've seen. It's been taken down since, and I've checked. It's not backed up anywhere or anything, unfortunately, so I can't. For legal reasons, I couldn't encourage you to watch it anyway, but, if it was there. But with all that information out of the way, let's get into talking about the game. First, let's start with what I saw, all right? It was a leaked video. It was about 25 to 30 minutes, and it showed about as much as you reasonably could in a video. It went through the menus, the settings, all the different buildings and units and abilities that are currently in the game. And based on that footage, what we can say is that there's only one race to play currently, and that's still the humans. So that's what we've seen thus far. It seems like they put a lot of development in ensuring that there's one very playable race, though. And everything seems very thought out on it. And then after this, after showing off all the different stuff in the race, the video then shows a 1v1 game, which was, as you'd expect in TVT, a Proxy 2 Rex that was held off by workers, which we'll talk about a little bit. And then he ended up losing to the new Hedgehog. And I feel like it gives a lot of information about how the current mechanics work, and what could probably already use a bit of reworking. One of the biggest points people are talking about in Stormgate is the resources. In it now, you have two resources, right? Pretty standard. You have Luminite and Therium. Luminite resources are located in mines that you harvest, kind of like Warcraft, but not quite. You don't require a building, so it's not like the Undead where you have to, haunt the gold mine or anything. In Stormgate, workers just kind of swarm around it and then mine from it and pull it out. So instead of a 1-to-1, like in Warcraft, where you send in a worker and they just kind of, it's more like minerals where your workers will swarm it. And this goes up to a maximum efficiency of 12 workers, according to the little tooltip that hides above your building. It does look like you can fit more workers around it, probably 15 or 16. However, at that point, they're traveling all the way to the back of the mine, then around, and then to your command center. Command center being a placeholder just for your main building in Stormgate, because I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but it's basically a command center. And so, we'll see about efficiencies. I have a feeling that once the game really starts hitting its stride, we'll see that 12 number change a little bit. And so, Luminite being your main resource, that's going to be how you build things, you're building your units, it's going to be your main resource, right? Your secondary resource is Therium. And this one also does not require a building to harvest, unlike Vespene gas from StarCraft. It's much similar to wood in the fact that there is a Therium mine, so you can return to that like a lumber mill. And so there's this little dichotomy. It's like, all right, a little bit of StarCrafty, a little bit of Warcrafty, a little bit of change up in the middle. And as the Stormgate, the Frost Giant devs have said, that's kind of what they're aiming for. And I think they're really striking that balance. But we'll get into my opinions later. What this means, one interesting thing to point out is that since you can now have these Therium mines, you don't need to put the Therium near your base. And now, once again, for the Warcraft guys, it's like, oh yeah, there's like a patch of lumber over there. Well, StarCraft isn't very used to that, and a lot of other RTSs. So, for people coming from a StarCraft background, this is going to be a bit of a change where it's like, okay, I need to hold like this side of the map because there's a Therium mine here, and I can mine from, and I can, kind of use that for map control. Another very different change is that Therium on the map has a blocker on it that you can't mine from it until it's destroyed. And the alpha texture is kind of like this red puddle over the mine, but you have to kill that before you can actually start mining from it. Another very interesting change is that the Therium seems to spread out from the mine. Unfortunately, the video didn't give quite a good look, and I haven't gotten quite a lot of information on it, but it does seem that over time, Therium spreads out from the mine, taking up more space in your base until it's mined out. And that's kind of a bad thing because it means it's going to limit the amount of space you have in your base to build. But it also is a good thing because Therium doesn't need to be in your base. It can be over there. It can be over there, you know? And with this, you now have the freed up building space because of the Therium mine. And generally speaking, it all feels very natural in terms of resource collection. And it's going to be a good game. One thing to know is that it doesn't seem like there's as many assists when it comes to like building placement and such. Kind of like how StarCraft 2 has like a very well-designed grid. And so that means it might be a bit harder for new players to get learn your Sim Cities. Like, oh yeah, so this building goes here, this building goes here, and that's how you protect yourself from a rush. It looks like that is going to be a bit harder for new players. And there is, of course, a limit on how close your main can be to the resource, which is pretty standard, but since they've been changing a lot of things, it is worth pointing out. You know, overall, it seems like this is a very well-built and very well-designed tech tree, and like the buildings feel good. And, you know, there's only one defensive structure for the humans currently, and it's not a bunker, finally. It's this big old turret that's also can be fully refunded. We won't talk about that in a bit, I promise. One thing that is lacking in StormGate, and for better or for worse, depending on who you ask, is range indicators. So no attacks or abilities have range indicators when showing how far they'll affect. You know, StarCraft 2 has them for just about everything. So if you click on a siege tank, you click on, a Nexus for overcharge, you got the little dotted circle, right? Or a tank with the range. You don't have any of that in StormGate. And some people will find this harder. Some people will find this better. This is going to be up to the personal preference of the players, and it really depends on what game you're coming from. StarCraft 2 people won't like it. Warcraft, Brood War guys, they're going to be like, oh, this is normal. And another big thing that stands out here, and this is the key one, is the command card. So I'm going to try and put a rudimentary drawing on screen, so hopefully it's here. But you now have... So you have your command card, and it is tied to grid. And I know a lot of people don't like grid. I'm a big grid believer. I love me some grid. But if you're not a grid believer, it's going to be a bit rough because there's currently no way to change it. Yep, there's no way to change keybinds at all, which is, it feels very much like an alpha thing, right? It's like, we'll add that in later, right? Let's worry about, making the game playable. And, yeah. But it gets deeper than that. Because there's a huge change. It's now, you have your 3 rows of your command card, right? Your QWERT, your ASDF, ZXCVB, right? Sorry, I had to look down at my keyboard for that one. Now, the first row is actually different selections. So you can now, instead of your move, your stop, your attack, right? The things you expect on the top row, it is now select your command centers, select your production, select your upgrades, select your this, that, So instead of, say, having a control group for all of your buildings or a camera hotkey to go to your buildings, you just hit, W, build all the units of all the different types. And just build whatever you need. And that means that macro is going to be so much easier in the heat of battle. You are now, if you look at development, right? StarCraft 2 forced you to look back at your main base with the macro mechanics they added. The chrono, the injects, and the mules. The idea was you need to be looking at your main base. You need to be no matter what's happening on the battlefield, you've got to look back at your main. You got to be macroing. This takes that and flips it on its head. Because now instead of looking back, you can just go, I'm in the middle of battle, W, rebuild my army, switch back to my control groups, and then keep fighting. And this is going to make a huge change in how fights happen, especially with the slower time to kill. It's going to be very much more micro-dependent in how your engagements come, I think. But, we'll see. One of the smaller things that stuck out to me, and it kind of stuck, though, is that there's still a fair amount of placeholders and unanimated things. For a fair bit of the video that we saw, it's, the game looks very polished. The units are moving around, things are happening, things are lively and animated. And then there's an ability that he uses. And this is the first point where you see that there's some animation lacking. And essentially, if you upgrade your command center to tier 2, you now have this little scout drone that you can send out. And you just select your command center, you hit the button, you tell it where you want it to go, and it'll send a drone from your CC to the point, giving vision along the way, and then it'll provide vision where it's at. This is a targetable thing, so it can be killed, but it will last until it's killed. The thing is that there's no animation, it's just a placeholder. So it's literally like just a German Shepherd with a satellite dish on its back that just flies. It just looks so out of place. And yes, once again, these are alpha. This is an alpha, so you don't have that polish yet. But it's just like that, and some of the creep camps aren't polished yet. There's no real creeps yet. And speaking of the, I guess I'm not going to call it a scan. I guess the drone ability. I don't really know what it's called. But essentially, scan is that there's actually currently a glitch with it, according to the alpha testers I've talked to, where if you have one command center at tier 2 and you have other command centers in that same hotkey, all of them can send out the drone instead of just the tier 2 one. I'm just saying. It's one of those fun little bugs. And so, yeah, it's weird that there's still some of these, I would have figured that they would have finished the race. But once again, this is alpha footage, so we'll see. And as for the creeping and for the creep camps, and for those who don't know, creeping is a Warcrafty term, which just generally means that you're going to go out to a camp and kill creeps and get whatever they offer you. And instead of getting gold and such, currently the main thing you get is auras. You get a little bit of resources, but not a whole lot. It's like 20 luminite or something from them, and some of them give a little bit of therium, but it's not like a lot comparatively, right? But what you do get is you get healing auras and you get speed boost auras, and these auras last for quite a while, like a few minutes before the camp resets. So there is an aspect of just map control creeping still, and there's also an aspect of using them properly to take a fight. So it's, oh well, instead of like, oh, I need to be out creeping, it's I can set up, wait for him to attack, and then have this creep camp ready to kill so I can immediately heal my forces, right? Or you kill it mid-fight, you're pulling your guys back so they're healing, and then they're, cycling through the combat. This makes it from a need to a tactical decision, which is a very interesting change. And I'm curious to see how that'll play out as we see map control, become what people are thinking about in StormGate. The last thing I want to touch on is the multiplayer game that was shown, right? And I mentioned in the intro, it's a simple match, proxy 2 racks. For those who don't know, you take 2 barracks and you proxy them, or whatever the equivalency is where you build your lancers in StormGate. You just proxy them at like your opponent's 3rd or 4th, right near their natural, and you just keep sending in units, right? And yeah, so he's built in lancers until he got pushed back. And one of the biggest things that stands out in that is why he got pushed back. And that's because the workers, or Bobs as they're called, they're literally called BOBs, and they all say, hey, we're Bob. Yeah, they're called Bobs. And they were just really good combat units. And we all, in the StarCraft scene, a lot of people joke about SCVs being the best combat unit. Bobs are the best combat unit. And specifically for one reason, there's a buff you can apply to them. Even without the buff, they're good. But there's a buff, and it's an overcharge, essentially, that you can apply. And it happens in about a 1.5 or so CC radius from your main CC, or whatever CC activated at, that takes it, and it takes all your Bobs. It gives them increased health. It gives them increased repair speed, attack speed. It just supercharges them. And they just don't die. One thing that did stand out in the fighting between the Bobs and the Lancers is how good the micro abilities is. Like, how much this game is really going to come down to micro. Because you have that extra time with how much, the time to kill being much longer than, say, oh, I stormed your units. All your Hydras died because I stormed them. Or, oh, Disruptor blew up your Marine Medic or your Marine Marauder. Oh, well. Instead of that, there's really no AoE to work with. So you have to micro units one by one and hope for the best in the current state. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the overcharge, right? In my opinion, it kind of works similar to the call to arms for humans in Warcraft 3. But instead of them having to go back and be armed, if you're within that radius, they're powerful. And let's put it this way, overcharged Bobs v Lancers, I don't think a single Bob died, and he pushed back all of the Lancers just about. And yeah, it's an incredible, when a Bob can take on the combat unit 1-to-1 because of this ability, it's like, yeah. And when I was writing the script, which I loosely followed, I had mentioned in here that there's going to be a load of YouTube content like, I proxy CC'd and worker rush this guy, right? Well, I said that, and then I talked to the alpha testers. That's actually already a thing. The current meta is that you get a bunch of your workers together, you overcharge them across the map, and then you build turrets because everything is fully refundable. And so you just turret contain your opponent, hope they're not doing it to you, and you just have dogs, lancers, and bobs, and you just destroy their economy, and then you expand on the back of it. And then, you just refund things as you don't need them to rebuild your economy. It's going to be a very interesting game. I look forward to seeing what balance changes they implement based on some of this alpha play. All right, now let's talk about my overall thoughts here. Overall, I'm very positive on the game. I think it looks very smooth, and if they keep going down the path they're going, it's going to be a big hit on launch. But, it is early alpha footage, so, and a lot of people are criticizing the art style. Don't make me pull out the Alpha Brood War footage, all right? You know what I'm talking about, the Alpha Brood War Alpha. We all know that these guys, art styles can change. What really matters is that the core mechanics and the gameplay, what they're going for, works. And to me, and to the alpha testers I've talked with, it does. And so I do think that upon launch, if you have a chance, I think everyone should give this a shot. And obviously this will change as beta stuff comes out and, we see more of the game as this comes from, private NDA to public where you can actually talk about it and show footage. But I just wanted to tell you guys what I've seen and what we've been talking about in the scene. So, it's not openly talking about, I've had a couple conversations here and there. But I just hope that you guys enjoyed the video. And if you enjoy StarCraft content, you're in the right spot anyway. This is where I do it anyway. So feel free to hanging around, dropping a sub or a like. Thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future.